My husband best friend did this to me in the room. A true infidelity story. I remember the first time I met Jake, my husband's best friend. It was a warm summer afternoon during a barbecue at our house. I had just finished setting up the garden, and the scent of grilled burgers filled the air, mingling with the laughter of our friends. When Jake arrived, he walked in tall and relaxed, exuding an effortless charm that immediately drew people to him. I noticed how my husband, Mark, seemed to light up with laughter around him, and I couldn't help but smile at their easy camaraderie. As the afternoon turned into evening, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow across the yard. We all gathered around the fire pit, sharing stories and drinks. But as the night wore on, I found myself glancing at Jake more often than I should have. There was something about him that felt magnetic, familiar, yet dangerous. It was the kind of energy that made you feel both curious and cautious at the same time. Over the next few months, Jake became a regular part of our lives. He was always around, joining us for dinners, coming along on weekend trips and sharing inside jokes. His presence was comforting, yet increasingly, I realized there was a quiet tension growing between us. It wasn't anything overt, just fleeting moments, a quick glance, a brush of the arm, that made my heart race in ways I hadn't felt in years. One evening, Mark had to work late, and it ended up being just Jake and me alone in the living room. We put on a movie, but I could barely focus. The air between us felt heavy, thick with unspoken words. My heart beat faster with every glance we exchanged. I knew he felt it too. At one point, he broke the silence. "Do you ever think about how strange it is?" he asked, his voice soft but deliberate. "How close we've all become." I tried to sound casual, though my nerves were electric. "Yeah, it's kind of unexpected, but I'm glad we did." Jake leaned back, his eyes catching the flickering light from the screen. "Sometimes I wonder how easy it is to blur the lines, you know?" My breath caught in my throat. I knew exactly what he meant, and the thought both thrilled and terrified me. Crossing that line felt like stepping into a dangerous unknown, and yet the idea was intoxicating. I quickly changed the subject, laughing off the tension, but I couldn't shake the weight of what he had said. That night, as I lay in bed, my thoughts kept drifting back to Jake. The connection between us was undeniable, yet I was deeply aware of the danger it posed. I loved Mark. I valued our life together. But the more time I spent with Jake, the more complicated everything became. The weeks that followed were a blur of conflicting emotions. I tried to push my feelings aside, but they crept back in, slipping into quiet moments, a shared laugh, a lingering look. Every time it felt like there was more at stake. I was torn between desire and loyalty, unsure of how to navigate the growing tension without crossing a line I couldn't undo. Then, on a rainy Saturday, things shifted. Mark had gone on a fishing trip, and I found myself alone. Jake called to check in, and before I knew it, I invited him over. I told myself it was just for company, just two friends hanging out. But when he arrived, the air felt different. The rain tapping softly against the windows made everything feel more intimate, more intense. We started with small talk, reminiscing about past adventures. But as the hours passed, our conversation deepened. Jake told me things he hadn't shared before, opening up in ways that felt almost too close. At one point, he looked directly at me, his voice steady but sincere. "I've always admired the way you handle everything," he said. "You're strong in a way that's inspiring." I felt a warmth spread through me at his words, and before I realized it, we were sitting closer than before. The space between us seemed to disappear, each shared laugh bringing us nearer. I could feel the charge in the room, like a current buzzing just beneath the surface, daring me to cross a line I wasn't sure I should. Then, A loud crash of thunder startled me, and Jake chuckled softly. "Looks like we're stuck here for a while," he said, his eyes sparkling with something mischievous. As the storm outside intensified, so did the conversation. We shared dreams and secrets, confessions that seemed to pull us closer together. Every word felt like a step towards something we couldn't quite define. Finally, Jake leaned in just a little, his voice barely above a whisper. "Have you ever felt like you're on the brink of something, but you just can't cross over?" My heart pounded in my chest. "All the time," I admitted. "It's like there are invisible walls holding me back." He inched closer, his warmth radiating toward me. "What if those walls aren't as solid as they seem?" His words lingered in the air, heavy with temptation. My mind raced. Part of me wanted to let go, to leap past those walls and see what lay beyond. But I hesitated, torn between the thrill of the unknown and the love I had built with Mark. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil inside me, each raindrop a reminder of the risks I was facing. I glanced at Jake, and for a fleeting second, it felt like we were standing on the edge of something that could change everything. It felt like we were the only two people in the world when my phone buzzed with a message from Mark. I quickly glanced at it. He was stuck in traffic and wouldn't be home for at least another hour. My heart sank. This was a moment, a pivotal one, and I suddenly became acutely aware of the gravity of the situation. "Maybe we should watch a movie or something," I suggested, hoping to ease the tension that hung heavy between us. "Sure," Jake replied, though the intensity in his gaze lingered. As the movie played, I found it nearly impossible to focus. The unspoken feelings between us weighed down the air, thick and undeniable. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, peering into the unknown, knowing the choice I made could change everything. The tension was palpable. The film droned on, but my mind was elsewhere. Every now and then, I caught Jake stealing glances at me, his expression a mix of curiosity and something far deeper. I felt both exhilarated and terrified, the thrill of the moment clashing with the potential consequences. When the movie finally ended, the tension remained. Jake shifted a little closer, his arm brushing against mine, sending a jolt through me. "This might sound crazy, but I feel like there's something between us," he said quietly, his voice steady but soft. My heart raced. "I feel it too," I admitted, my voice barely audible. "But we can't. I mean, Mark is—" "I know," Jake interrupted gently. "But sometimes it feels like we're just pretending everything is normal when it's not." His honesty hit me hard. I'd spent so long convincing myself that my feelings for Jake were fleeting, something I could push aside. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. "Maybe we should just take a step back," I said, my voice trembling. "I don't want to hurt Mark. He's my husband, and he trusts us." Jake looked conflicted, the pain clear in his eyes. "I don't want to hurt anyone either," he said, running his hand through his hair. "But I can't help how I feel." The rain outside continued to beat against the windows, a steady rhythm that mirrored the storm inside me. I was standing at a crossroads, one path leading to safety, the other to an uncertain thrill that could shatter everything. Suddenly a loud clap of thunder shook the house, and the lights flickered, plunging us into darkness. My pulse quickened, and I could feel Jake's presence beside me, his warmth both comforting and dangerous. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, his voice close, his concern palpable. "I'm fine," I replied, though my heart was pounding in my chest. Just a little startled. In the darkness, something shifted between us. Jake's hand brushed against mine, and instead of pulling away, I let it stay there, feeling the heat radiating from his skin. It was as if the storm outside had broken down the walls between us, leaving nothing but raw, unspoken emotions. What if we just talked about it? Jake suggested, his voice barely above a whisper. What if we allowed ourselves to explore this, even just a little? I took a deep breath, my mind racing. Exploring this connection felt dangerous, but the temptation was overwhelming. I don't know if we should, I said, my voice shaky. What if it ruins everything? Or what if it reveals something important? He replied gently. Sometimes you have to take a risk to figure out what you really want. His words hung in the air, filled with meaning. I was torn between my loyalty to Mark and the undeniable chemistry with Jake. This wasn't just about a fleeting attraction. It was about discovering something deeper, something I hadn't even realized I was searching for. Before I could respond, Jake leaned in slightly, his breath warm against my skin. "I'm not trying to pressure you," he said, his voice soft but sincere. "But I need you to know that I care about you, more than just as a friend." My heart fluttered, and I felt my cheeks flush. "Jake, Just then, the lights flickered back on, illuminating the room and the tension between us. I felt exposed, like a secret revealed too soon. I could see the vulnerability in his eyes, mirroring my own uncertainty. "I think we need to be honest with each other," I said, my voice gaining strength. "But we have to be careful. I can't hurt Mark, and I don't want to lose either of you." Jake nodded, the tension still thick in the air. "I get it. Let's take it one step at a time." I felt the weight of my decision settle over me, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything. We were at a precipice, ready to jump into the unknown, and there was no turning back. As the storm outside began to quiet, a strange calm settled between us. We sat in silence, each of us lost in our thoughts, the air still charged with possibility. I felt like I was walking a tightrope, balancing precariously between desire and duty. "Let's start with honesty," I finally said, my heart racing. "What do we want from this?" Jake took a deep breath, his eyes meeting mine. "I want to understand what this connection between us really is. I don't want to hide it anymore, but I also don't want to put you in a position where you feel trapped." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and fear. "I want that too. I just need to be clear. I love Mark. He's my partner, and I can't hurt him," I said, feeling the weight of my words. "I respect that," Jake replied, his voice calm but sincere. "But there's something real here, and I don't think either of us should ignore it." The seriousness of our situation hung between us like a heavy cloud. I'd always taken pride in my loyalty to Mark, but the undeniable spark between Jake and me was both exhilarating and terrifying, a reminder that life is often more complicated than we'd like to admit. "What if we agreed to explore our friendship a little more?" I suggested cautiously. "Without crossing any lines that would hurt Mark. We can figure out what this is, without letting it become something it shouldn't." Jake nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds fair. We can take our time and see where it goes, without rushing into anything or making decisions we'd regret." As the rain outside finally began to ease, I felt a mix of hope and anxiety. I didn't want to lose the connection I had with Jake, but I was also acutely aware of how much was at stake. My relationship with Mark, the life we'd built. It felt like walking a tightrope, and I could only hope we'd manage the balance. In the weeks that followed, Jake and I found ways to grow closer without crossing any boundaries. We texted more, sharing our thoughts and dreams, and built a deeper connection that stayed within the lines of friendship. It was exciting, even comforting, to have someone who seemed to understand me so well, but I was always careful not to let things slip into dangerous territory.